Bismillah. Okay, it's working fine. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الرحمن الرحيم. مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون. وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائما. قل ما عند الله خير من اللهو ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين. صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah. Once again, I would like to thanks to you for being here. As in this evening, we have two guests. One is Brother Izhar and second is Brother Umar Sheikh. Brother Izhar is going to talk on capitalism and Islamic perspective, and Brother Umar Sheikh, as he is our chief guest. Thank you for Brother Umar for being here in this evening. He is going to talk on Islamic finance in the UK. First, I would like to call Brother Izhar, as he is from India and he has several certifications in Islamic finance. He is currently doing his master from University of Glasgow, and he is the founding president of Society for Islamic Finance and Islamic Entrepreneurship. He has several awards, including IBA Australia Scholarship, Country Scholarship from University of Glasgow, Global Leadership Experience. He has been delivering lectures on Siratul Nabi since the age of 19 on various Islamic topics, and he also has been conducting summer classes in 2011 on Siratul Nabi for Children Islamic Information Center for South Australia. So I would like to call Brother Izhar. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khair, brother. Yeah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا يكون بين الأغنياء دولة بين الأغنياء منكم وما آتاكم الرسول فخذوه وما نهاكم عنه فانتهوا واتقوا الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وقالوا إنما البيع مثل الربا وحل الله البيع وحرم الربا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. The topic for the evening, which I have been given, is capitalism and Islamic perspective. I welcome my chief guest, Brother Umar Sheikh from Islamic Finance Council, and I'm very much obliged and thankful to the Brother Izhar Khan, who was doing his PhD in University of Glasgow, one of the prominent members of the society. See, the topic of the talk is the capitalism and Islamic perspective. Before understanding both the words, we need to understand the definition of both the words, like capitalism and Islam. Capitalism, if you can see the Oxford Dictionary, it means that an economic system where trade and industries are privately owned and operated for the purpose of profit. This particular capitalism, like for example, any system has got basic tenets and basic foundations and basic pillars. Like Islam also has got a basic pillars. If you see analyze the capitalism from different perspective, like for example, any society has three perspectives: economical, social, and political. If you see the capitalism from the economic perspective, it can mean a free market system. From the political system, it can mean a laissez-faire system. And from social, it can mean individualism. I'll explain all of three. Like for example, in economical sense, for example, if I say a free market, it means that all the private players are allowed to privately and on their will allowed to operate freely without any intervention from the government. Means any player, for example, any market player can come into the market and operate on his will without intervention from the government. Political means a laissez-faire, that's a French term, which means let them do. For example, whatever business, without putting any restriction on the business side, like for example, they can do a business of alcohol, they can do the business of nudity, any kind of business without restriction, whatever they will, whatever they feel that this can bring the profit to organization and maximize the shareholders' value, the government has to allow them, because it's a laissez-faire system and the government cannot intervene in any capacity. Third, for example, social point of view, it means individualism. Means any individual is allowed, should concentrate on his achievement rather than a society as a whole. So every individual will be thinking of himself, that how I can maximize my career opportunity, how I can grow in the career, rather than thinking of his act, what effect it's going to have on society as a whole. Irrespective of that particular result, the individual is going to act in his own capacity as per his own will without putting any restriction from whatsoever it may be. But if you see the basic system of Islam, the Islam means the salam means peace. Islam means the submitting, the acquiring peace by submitting the will to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like these are the three basic pillars of a capitalism. If you see the Islamic basic pillar, there's a very famous hadith from the Umar radiyallahu anhu that Buni al-Islam ala khamsin shahadati an la ilaha illallah anna Muhammadur Rasulullah iqam as-salati wa ita az-zakat hajj al-bayt wa sawm Ramadan. Islam is based on 5 pillars. That believing that there is only one Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Prophet Muhammad is the messenger and his servant. And establishing salah and giving zakah and performing the hajj if you have the capacity to do so, and fasting for 1 month in the Ramadan. Islam means that, for example, that whatever you do, it has to be within the boundary prescribed framed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger. As the verse which I recited to you, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا يكون دولة بين الأغنياء منكم وما أعطاكم الرسول فخذوه وما نهاكم عنه فانتهوا. That whatever messenger, that let not the wealth revolve among the wealthy people of society. And whatever messenger gives you, take it, and from whatever he forbids you, stay away from it, abstain from it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the boundary, has put the boundary on the Muslim on which direction and what framework they can work in, and in what framework they can do the deeds. But as far as the capitalism is concerned, the capitalism, any individual, if you follow the laissez-faire system, they are allowed to do whatever they will, irrespective of its effect on society as a whole. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Surah Baqarah, Allah ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan-nasu kulu mimma fil ardi halalan tayyiban wa la tattabi'u khutuwati shaitan. O mankind, eat whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made halal for you, and do not follow the footsteps of Satan. Now, if you see the historical perspective, if you have to analyze the historical perspective of the capitalism, it started basically in 16th century, with the 16th century in the Europe, and capitalism can acquire different form based on the level of interaction between the government and the corporates. For example, there is a mercantilism, capitalism. It can be, for example, state capitalism. It can be corporate capitalism. It can be capital capitalism. Means it totally depends upon the level of interaction between the government and the corporate. For example, if the state is not allowing the corporates to work in their capacity as per their will and totally controlled, it will be called as state capitalism. All the corporates are owned by the state. And if, for example, if the corporates are given all the rights to operate in their own capacity without any intervention from the government, they will be called the corporate capitalism. Means now mostly, but these are the two idealistic forms. They can very rarely occur. The state capitalism and the corporate capitalism, they can occur very rarely. But nowadays, what we have in today's system, it's a mixed form of these things. Like the government is giving some kind of liberty to the corporates, and also keeping the hold of them, what they are doing, what the activities which they are doing. So it can totally depend upon the level of interaction between the corporates and the government. And it can take different form. Like for example, and there are several stakeholders in the capitalism. For example, one of the very important stakeholder is the bank. They are the banks. The banks are one of the main stakeholder of the capitalism. And second, like the government and the wealthy people, those who have their vested interest in the making the profits. For example, if you see, like there is a quote like banks are the one who are supplying the capital to the corporate to work in a given environment and make the profit. This particular thing and the way they are supplying the capital to the corporates is mainly based on the riba. So the present day capitalism which you see prevailing across the globe is based on the riba, because whatever the banks are operating in the given environment, one of the main stakeholder of the capitalism in modern capitalism, they are operating based on the riba based system, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has clearly prohibited in Surah Baqarah. If you see from the Surah 2, verse number 275 to 278, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very clear, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu wazru ma baqiya min ar-riba, those who believe, give up the riba. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has warned the believers, فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا, if you do not abstain from this, if you do not do this, فَأَذَنُوا بِحَرْبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, take an announcement from the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of the war, from Allah and His Messenger. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has clearly mentioned that those people who are involved in the riba and the modern day capitalism, which is very prevalent in our society, and the banks which are supplying the capital to the capitalistic, the person who is operating in a given environment, that's really a sad thing. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited the riba in different capacity, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam also has held those people who are involved in the riba, in like writing and giving the witness and taking the riba and giving the riba, they all are equally involved in the sin. Like there's a very famous hadith from Tirmidhi where Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that لعن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أكل الربا وموكله وكاتبه وشاهده وقالهم سواء, that the people, they all are equal in the sin. Those who write, those who become a witness, those who eat it, and those who give it, they all are equal in the sin. So why there are several ill effects, there are several hazards of the riba on society as a whole. For example, it creates the income inequality in society. The rich get more richer and poor get more poorer. If you see many reports, even if you go to the Bayan store, the Oxfam shop is there, you can read that most of the world's wealth is held by only few people. 85 people who holds about 80% of the wealth. You can count on their fingertips. Even today in the lecture I was seeing that there is one states are there on one side and the companies are on one side. The companies are holding more wealth than the countries in today's modern world. The companies, like for example, if you can see the Walmart is there, Ford is there, Ford Motors, General Motors, and the big corporation, they are holding the more wealth than the state themselves. Like if you see in many African countries and Asian countries which are there, they are having the less wealth than the corporate companies themselves. So it creates, for example, let the wealth be among the few individuals in society, and all the people are deprived of the benefits which could have been brought up by distributing the equal distribution of them. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said very clearly in Surah Hashr, chapter 59, verse 7, that لَا يَكُونَ دُولَةً بَيْنَ الْأَغْنِيَاءِ مِنْكُمْ, let not the wealth revolve among the few people, wealthy people of your society. So the basic concept, what's happening with the capitalism today is that wealth is revolving in the hand of few individuals, and other people are deprived of the benefits, which by distributing, with a very beautiful system of Islam is there, the zakat. If, for example, if you go to the Zakat Foundation, I think in the UK itself, they have mentioned on their website that only, for example, if 10 richest people of the world give the zakat, then it will amount to about several $7 billion, and the poverty can be definitely removed. Like if you say 10 top people of the world, they are having the wealth about more than $500 billion. And whereas the people in the African region are dying of the poverty, they are dying of the children are dying every day, thousands of children are dying every day because of the lack of the proper sanitation, proper medical equipments are not available there, the food is not available there. So these are the reasons which are the effects which are caused due to the capitalism, because the wealth is revolving in the hands of the few people. So Islam does not want the wealth to revolve in the hands of the few people. Rather, Islam wants let the wealth revolve, get distributed, equally distributed. Islam does not prohibit any company or any individual from acquiring wealth, but it puts the boundary and puts the limitation that you have to acquire the wealth in a particular way. In a particular way, you have to acquire the wealth, and you need to give back to society so that society can benefit from you, because society has given you in the form of labor, in the form of capital, whatever resources society has provided you, that you have to give back to society so that the wealth, every individual meets his end need, her end needs at the end of the day. So it's very important that the capitalism, which is very prevalent in today's modern day, is bringing a lot of hazard to the people, and like for example, to the Society of Islamic Finance, which we have formed in this year, it aims that to make the people aware of the benefits of the Islamic finance and what is the Islamic economic system, how it will bring the equality in the society, and what are the benefits Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed in the Quran and Hadith by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these are very important things which need to be pondered on and which we need to think upon, and how the system can work on, and everybody in society get equal opportunity and equal amount of opportunity that they can do the business. And now what's happening, for example, let's say nowadays the quantitative easing which is happening in the Europe. For example, if you want to understand that, what will happen, the government is going to print the money, more and more money. It's not that the world is not having the money, but the money is being held by a few people, the individual. They do not want to take the risk. That is very beautiful system of Islam, that Islam wants everything on the basis of profit and loss sharing. For example, if any entrepreneurial activity which I'm going to take, I'm forming a company and I want to do the business, Islam tells you that you have to bear the risk. With the gain, you have to bear the risk as well. For example, if in case of loss, you have to bear the loss, and if the business gives the profit, you can take the profit. Now, what's happening in the quantitative easing? The people are having the money, but the government is printing more money, because if they don't print the money and don't print more and more money, and don't give it to the bank, and bank in turn will give it to the corporates, and the corporate will invest the money and everything. What happens actually? These corporates print the money, these banks will print the money, they have the more and more money from the central banks, and it will be given to the few companies, because the banks have their criteria, their credit worthiness, rather than looking at the project itself, for example, how the project is there, rather than taking the risk in entrepreneurial activity which will bring the benefit to society and will bring the benefit to the people. These banks will look at the past history of the corporates who are going to take the loans and the individuals, and give it to them on the interest basis. Like for example, do you take the interest and we will give it to you. If you see this particular thing, the quantitative easing, quantitative easing means basically printing more money in general sense, printing new money by the central banks. This particular experiment was done in UK as well. But what happened, when the bank disbursed the money, the individual, rather investing into the projects, they invested into the stock markets, and the money did not get utilized what it was meant for. So what happens actually, through this cycle, the vicious cycle which is there, many people fail to understand the cycle, what happens, the wealth actually revolves in the hands of the few people, and the wealthy people get more wealthier, and the poor people get more poor. So that's what Islam actually wants, that the wealth should revolve in the hands of all the people. All the people should get benefit. All the people have a major stake in society, because it's a land given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah is the one who is the responsible. It may seem that, for example, capitalism has brought many benefits. People may argue, like the GDP of the countries have grown tremendously. For example, from $1 trillion, the US has reached $16 trillion. UK is about more than $2.5 trillion. India is growing $1 trillion. Okay, that's $1 trillion. But if you see at the ground reality in many developed countries even, there is a lot many reports which I have seen on the TV as well in the UK. And the scenario is far different, far worse in the developing countries. If you see the India and the African countries over there, the only few people, like for example in India, there are people, those who are far, far richer, they are topping the chart among the wealthiest people in the world, the top 10. And there are people who are sleeping on the street. There are people in Mumbai as well, and in the India, many parts of the India and developing countries, they are sleeping on the streets. So what kind of benefit this capitalism brings? There are many people, even if you see the many economists, famous economists, like Schumpeter from the Austria, and many famous economists, even the Keynes also, the John Keynes of Central, he was a very famous economist of this century, and he was the governor of the central bank. They all, in some capacity, criticized the role of the interest. Because what happens, when the interest creates a business cycle. When, for example, interest gets higher, you need to understand that, I'll put very simple way to understand for you. When it creates a business cycle and creates a recession over the period of time. If we analyze the history of last 400 years, there is a sporadic, like periodic recession happening. This is not something which is brought by happening by chance, but it is a part of system. The periodic recession will keep on coming in system because the capitalistic system is designed in such a way. It designed in such a way that recession will keep on happening because everything in the investment revolves around the interest. The interest is there. For example, central bank raise the interest level, the bank will going to charge more interest, higher interest. The investment will be less. The moment the interest gets reduced, the investment will be more. So you need to understand that I cannot go into technicality of more and more, but it's which is a cycle which revolves around this interest-based system. So the people, in capitalist society, the wealth is revolving in the few hands, and the people are dying of the many things which are creating the people away from the true benefit which the Quran and Hadith can bring upon. So I'll just end my talk by telling you that Islam is a system which brings the benefit to each and every individual by considering each and every individual society, whether it is poor or either wealthy. And Islam has given a system which will be, if it is implemented in true sense, will destroy and will remove the barrier and the gap between the rich and poor in society. Wa akhir dawana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Thank you for Brother Izhar. Now we are having our chief guest, Brother Umar Sheikh. He is much experienced, mashallah. He is currently board member of IFC, Islamic Finance Council, and he is ex-head of Islamic Finance of Ernst & Young, London. I think you know this is accounting firm is like in Big Four, and he is also advisor to the UK government for Islamic finance issues, and he is a professionally chartered accountant, an ex-alumni of Glasgow Uni, and ex-president of GUMSA. I think you know that's Glasgow Uni Muslim Student Association, and he has been delivering talk and lectures and well-recognized international speaker on Islamic finance, often quoted on BBC, CNN and other media. So I would like to call Brother Umar Sheikh to deliver a talk on the topic of Islamic finance and UK. Brother Umar Sheikh.
Gentlemen, normally start ladies and gentlemen, but today, just gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. May the peace and the blessings of the Almighty Allah be with all of you. First of all, my deep thanks to the organisers, Brother Izhar, Brother and Ahmed as well, who's been helping for taking the initiative and the effort to put together today's event. I think the Islamic finance industry is particularly young, and sessions and seminars like this are very important for us all to understand and benefit from the growth of the sector. It's always, when Izhar said I have to come and speak, although I'm quite humbled by being the keynote guest, being an ex-Glasgow University boy myself, simple Glaswegian. It's very humbling, but when Izhar said I have to come, then I have to come. As an alumni, you don't have a choice. Otherwise, they take your degree away from you, and I would lose my job. But one of the nice things actually of having a nice, smaller, cozy audience is what I find is, if you don't mind, I'd like to just go around and ask everyone what their name is and what they're doing and what specifically you'd like to understand with regards to Islamic finance or get out of this lecture, if you will allow me.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
That's okay, because
You
in
are
that way I
welcome.
can.
Yeah, you are the one.
I can, it just allows me to tailor what I'm saying and ultimately be of benefit to all of you. Otherwise, it's a wasted evening for yourself, so I don't want to do that. So if I actually write from the back and then I'll come down. So.
I'm Farhan. I'm second year accounting and finance.
Okay. Is there anything specific on Islamic finance, Farhan, you wanted to, or is it just generally you want to understand?
My name's Anwar. I'm a third year civil engineering student. What I'm looking to find out is just the basics of Islamic finance, what it's about, because we hear about it a lot and it's such a great thing and everyone should do it, but I don't really understand what it is. So.
My name is Muhammad. I'm doing masters in civil engineering. The important thing the comparison between capitalism and the Islamic finance, this is the main point I'm interested in.
That's already covered.
Yeah.
Tick that box.
Yeah, that's the basic reason.
Yeah.
My name is Khalid. I'm a mechanical engineering master's student as well. I'm just here to broaden my perspective today about Islamic financing. I've never been into a session like this before, so I thought why not.
You're all at Glasgow University?
Yeah.
Very good.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Seth. I'm studying electrical engineering here at Glasgow. So I've never came across Islamic finance. It's the first time for me, and I just want to find a general overview of how does it affect our daily lives.
Hi, my name is Adnan, and I'm studying business and management first year. And I just wanted to know more about zakat and Islamic finance.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Amir. I am studying accounting with finance first year. Alhamdulillah, I've had some experience in Islamic finance through doing an internship with Brother Omar. What I would like for you to probably touch upon is Islamic mortgage, because every time I talk about that topic, it seems to, I sound interesting to people suddenly. So inshallah, if you could probably touch upon how Muslims could probably take that on, take it out, and what the difference is between Islamic mortgage and a normal mortgage, probably that would help. Inshallah.
Sure.
My name is Jim. I'm an undergraduate studying economics. Brother Izhar invited me to attend this lecture. I think Islam finance is this is a good opportunity for me to study Islam finance. It could enhance my economic knowledge.
Okay.
Assalamualaikum. My name is Liaquat, property development. Basically, just to see someone who's in the field of finance and how he applies it in this day and age in terms of the Islamic perspective on it. Be quite interesting to find out how it all works.
My name is Manowar. I'm in work in IT. I'm just here to correct your mistakes.
Where's a friend of mine, we came together. He normally has he's from Liverpool actually, I'm surprised he put on a Scottish accent. Fine, no, it's okay. Okay, what I will do is I'll talk through some of the general principles, how the industry works and the basic concepts. We'll go through an example of the Islamic mortgage, because that applies to the property field, and I'm sure how that's different and how that links into some of the equity principles, which Brother Izhar mentioned, and then I'll touch on a bit about what the UK and the UK government's been doing and how the industry's functioning. So a bit, first of all, just about the Islamic Finance Council. As Brother Muhammad Yar mentioned, I sit on the board of the council. It's a not-for-profit body that was established to help develop the industry. Myself, Graham, Zahir, Richard, and a couple of other board members sit there, and we're active primarily in 4 key areas. One is government policy advisory. We've been appointed to advise various governments in Africa, in the Gulf, and so on, and here in the UK. Second is around the area of ethical finance. We host a series of roundtables in Edinburgh around the theme of ethical finance, where we see Islamic finance being one part of the broader ethical finance arena. We work a lot with in the arena of Sharia assurance and Sharia governance, where we train Sharia scholars on conventional finance. Islamic finance, one of the key distinctive features of Islamic finance is what makes a product halal or Sharia compliant is the sign-off from a Sharia scholar. And we also have we also work in the area of executive training and education. We also do other bits of work around advocacy, promotion, education and awareness events like this, and in the Islamic microfinance and in the Awqaf space as well. The council, what's interesting, if I may say, is our origin is actually based here in Scotland, which is something which is important to note, I think. Scotland has a very proud history in ethical finance. We're sitting here today in the University of Glasgow talking about capitalism. The father of modern day capitalism is, as we all know, is the great Adam Smith. In the early 18th century, he was a professor teaching here, and very often cited as the early kind of thinkers for modern day economics. And what's interesting, so in one way it's very apt that we're having this seminar and session here in the University of Glasgow, being the home of Adam Smith, part of the Scottish Enlightenment that we saw in the period of the early 18th century. But what's also very interesting is he was actually known to be a moral philosopher. His early works are actually the theory of moral sentiments, although the wealth of nations is something which is often quoted and cited. But what's interesting is the moral element to his work and his moral philosophy and how that links in with economics. And that should highlight to you, particularly as we've got a group of engineers in the room, I see, and engineers and financial engineering is a very dangerous kind of space, because a lot of the derivatives market and the subprime mortgages was driven by rocket scientists, literally engineers who came into the world of banking and created amazing financial models which nobody understood the maths or the quants around, and as a result engineered one of the largest downfalls in the financial sector ever. Not that I'm saying it's your fault or you gents on that row, kind of thing, but it's nice and again very interesting to see probably more presence from engineers than from accountants and economists. But one thing's interesting to note when it comes to economics is anyone who's ever got an economic degree will tell you it's a Bachelor of Arts that you get awarded ultimately. And I remember when my older sibling, he studied economics at Downing College in Cambridge, and I remember many years ago going to his graduation ceremony, he came out with a certificate and it was like Bachelor of Arts, and I was a young lad at Glasgow Uni actually then, and I think, what's this, Croatia? You've been jumping around, dancing around on stage for the last 3 years. But the thing is, the reality is it's considered as a social science, economics, because actually it's not exact, it's not, something which has a definitive output. And through the decades of working in the city, I realized that, well, actually a lot of financial markets, any seasoned investment manager will tell you, and you referred to cycles earlier, in the system, you'll find markets are driven more by fear and greed, by human behavior trends, than they are by necessarily any economic theory or whatever that is that we try to put in a retrospective manner to try and understand and quantify and explain what's actually going on. So there's some fascinating features of the world of economics. So Islamic finance, an industry overview. I often refer to it as broader than banking and wider than the Middle East. Islamic finance, because of one of the key prohibitions, which is you cannot receive or charge interest, means all of your financial markets are impacted. So the world of insurance, the world of banking, the world of asset management, the world of real estate, everything gets impacted. So it's a horizontal niche that cuts across all the various asset classes and sectors. And it's broader than the Middle East. It's not just a story of petrodollars and Gulf liquidity, but actually there's hubs and centers for Islamic finance in South Asia, in Far East, in Malaysia, in Sudan, and in many other parts of the world. The industry is now worth close to $2 trillion. That slide probably needs to be updated. It's worth close to $2 trillion. And it's a relatively young industry as well, Islamic banking. It's one of the fastest growing sectors within the broader financial services arena. when I say young, you're really only talking about 25 years, 30 years roughly of contemporary practice, prior to which there was nothing in that field of Islamic banking. And another interesting fact, which again links us back to Scotland, one of the early attempts for Islamic banking was done in the 60s and in the 70s. So the two early players, one was Mitzgomer, a bank in Egypt, and the other one was Dubai Islamic Bank. And the chap who set up Mitzgomer in Egypt actually took the savings bank model, which he found was prevalent around Europe at the time, and said, well, actually this is a bit like Islamic finance and its principles and its underlying methodology and so on, and used that model as the key blueprint for the first Islamic bank. The savings bank, you might have heard of Adri Savings Bank, or TSB. Have you anyone here heard of TSB? Do you know what it stands for? Trustees Savings Bank. So the concept of the savings bank was actually originated here in Scotland by the great Reverend Henry Duncan, just over 200 years ago, from the Church of Scotland. And that model gave birth to the early attempts of Islamic banking, which is another beautiful, I think, context in which we're having this discussion. The traditional hubs, as I mentioned, are in Malaysia and Bahrain, UAE. Increasingly over the last decade, I would say London's become a key player as well in Islamic finance. We've had a sovereign sukuk issuance from the UK government, the first ever Western non-Muslim country to issue a sovereign sukuk being a bond, so a government bond. And we've also had states in Germany like Saxony-Anhalt who've also issued such bonds as well over 5 years ago. We've had since then Hong Kong, Luxembourg and South Africa also issue sovereign, Islamically structured sovereign bonds. And there are, so you might ask the question, what are the fundamental differences? What are the key principles? A few of you asked, they want to know the basics and a general overview. Anwar, Saif Khalid, you asked about some of the key principles. So this is how I would explain it in a quick nutshell, in a very brief manner. Islamic finance is best understood through two lenses. One is ethical finance, right? So many people will be familiar with the term ethical finance, which means financial services, which is avoiding engaging in things deemed harmful to society. The whole universe of ethical finance covers green bonds, carbon neutral bonds, social impact bonds, cooperative bank, Triodos Bank, XYZ. But broadly speaking, and it's very difficult to give a singular definition, it's something that most people from different faith groups or no faith group will be familiar with. It's different shades of green. It's often referred to as deep green, light green, and so on. So that's one lens to try and simplify Islamic finance. The other lens which is applied is the ban of interest, riba, which Brother Izhar mentioned the verses earlier. Right? So you cannot receive or charge interest. And it's important to note the word interest as opposed to the word usury. First of all, the ban on usury or interest is something that you find across the Abrahamic faith. So you find it in the Old Testament, in the Jewish tradition, and you'll also find it in the Christian tradition as well. Indeed, it goes back to the Greek time of Greek philosophers, where we've had Aristotle making comments that its interest is the most peculiar of thing. How can something non-organic multiply, right? So if I give you a coin, or if I give you this phone, non-organic matter, over a period of 12 months or 6 months, how can this multiply by 10% or 50%, whatever your interest rate charge is? So there was philosophical kind of problems in understanding interest at that time as well. Amongst the Jewish traditions, you'll find the get-out clause was you cannot receive or charge interest amongst yourself, but you can to the non-Gentile, right, to the non-Jew, which is why you find, again, the history of many of the banks being from amongst Jewish families and so on and so forth, and the money lenders, and you just read Macbeth and you'll see the rest. In the Christian church, it was also banned completely, and over time, it crept back into the church using inter-estate, between period, late payment fees, and then they brought in the distinction between usury and interest being as defined by, using the dictionary, defined as excessive interest is not allowed, but interest generally is allowed, you know. And that's why we had in this country the laws of usury, banning usury, which is a shame because I don't think those laws apply anymore, which it's shocking when you see payday lenders nowadays with like 1400% APR quoted, as you'll see Wonga and many of these other sunny day pay lenders and so on and so forth. You by law have to quote your APR, and you'll see some crazy 4-digit numbers in place there. But that's a conversation for another day. In Islam, the ban on interest remained very strict, and the contemporary scholars had a discussion on this. Is there a difference between usury and interest? However, the majority of the scholars from all of the different madahib and all of the different theological perspectives have agreed that any interest, be it 1% or be it 1000%, any increment on that original principle as an interest transaction is not allowed. And this is the view of the OIC Fiqh Academy, and this is the view of the majority of scholars who represent IOFI, which is the International Board for Islamic scholars involved in Islamic finance. Of course, the definition of riba goes beyond that. It's slightly wider as well. It's excess, it's burden, and so on. Brother Izhar, I'm sure, can touch on that more. But that's important to note. So they're the two lenses. So in today's world, anyone who does economics, finance, involved in a property transaction, normally when I speak to my non-Muslim friends when I was back at EY, when I said it was banking without interest, they would literally fall off their seat and start laughing. Said, "Are you mad? Are you smoking something? How can you have banking without interest? The fundamental pulse, the fundamental of financial services and financial capital markets is interest, right? How can you do that?" And that then opens up a very curious mindset and a whole bunch of questions. There are some other underlying principles as well, which is important to note. One of which is Islamic finance is generally asset-backed transactions, where you can finance transactions based around assets. It has the prevention of speculation and uncertainty, so a lot of the derivatives market is taken out, the concept of gharar. There has to be complete certainty in contracts and so on. There's a profit and loss sharing, the equity principle, which was touched on earlier, which is a core principle whereby, yes, you can invest in things, but as a partnership, as a venture capital, as a private equity transaction, as a genuine partnership transaction. Which means if it goes up, we all do well, but if it goes down, guess what? We all take the hit. Whereas in a debt-based transaction, what happens when it goes down? Who takes the hit? The borrower, right? You still have to pay back principal on its repayment schedule plus interest. Ethical screen is what I talked about and interest earlier as well. So if you take some of those fundamental principles, the question might turn around and say, how would you structure an Islamic mortgage, right? If you cannot charge interest, yeah. And what I'll do is I'll just walk you through that one product example because you're in property, and Amir, you also asked about that particular thing. Probably a good example. But before I do that, that slide just again is the references to the to what I referred to earlier, and I'll come back to that. So there are basic transactions which are allowed. You are allowed to buy and sell something. Right? Is there any interest involved in buying and selling something in a shop? No? You buy it, you sell it. You can rent something. Yeah? I can rent it out. I can buy a fleet of cars and rent them out. I can do a partnership as a joint venture. We can both invest in something. So, and there's other structures as well which we can use as well. But they tend to be, those four up there on the slide tend to be some of the core structures which are used, underlying contracts which are used to structure Islamic financial products. So if we take the example of a mortgage, right? Mortgage, for those of you who had to suffer in grammar school, it comes from the Latin, which means death grip. Mort is a mortuary, and gauge is in gorge, which comes from the word death grip. Because normally it's with you till you die, right? In Islamic finance, this is why if you look at the Islamic banks, they changed the name from mortgage, first of all, to home purchase plans, yeah? Because they wanted to move away from the connotation of that language. How does an Islamic mortgage work? You asked that question, right? What normally would happen in an Islamic mortgage, I'll run through this very quickly, is you put a deposit down, say 20% of the property value, and then the bank or the Islamic bank would come and fund the other 80%. Yeah. So day one, you would be partners, you would be co-owners, you'd have a musharaka, a partnership. That one there, that structure there, right? What you would then do is the 80% of the property which you do not use, and I'm giving you an analogy of the diminishing musharaka product structure, by the way. There's been 3-4 other structures which have evolved over the last 15 years. What you would then do in the diminishing musharaka, which is the prevalent structure used today, is you would then rent from the bank the portion which the bank owns, which is 80%, yeah? And you would also agree with the bank to buy its portion, right? So you start off with 20% ownership, the bank starts with 80%, yeah? You guys following me? You with me? Slowly over time, you're buying the bank's portion and you're paying rent on the portion you do not own to the bank. Over a 10-15 year schedule, you'll end up in a situation where the bank owns nothing, you own all of the property, so you've got it, and the bank has received its money back, plus it has received a return and made some profit by what? Renting. Exactly. Very simple structure, right? Now if we applied this in the true spirit of, now that's an equity participation contract, which Izhar alluded to earlier, right? Now if you apply that, sorry, go on, yeah?
Is that the same as a private finance initiative, except the person who's buying the house is like acting as if they're government, working with a private company? Is it the same idea?
I haven't seen the private, which particular form?
Like
Do
when
you
it
mean like
comes
the help to buy initiatives, or do you mean?
No, I mean like when